Hello. Hello. Yes, that's more like it. Hello. It's lovely to see you all. Thank you for coming to a masterclass on is it a Tuesday or a Wednesday? Help me out. Well done. Tuesday. It's Tuesday evening. It's 6 o'clock-ish. And you've come to a masterclass. And what a fantastic masterclass this is going to be. I have the pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Joe Lisk from Darcy, who's going to be wowing you with all things AI. Just so you know, my name is Stephen Wilkinson. I'm the Dean of Digital Education. And don't worry, I haven't heard of you either. But I am responsible for looking after your learning technology provision, which is why you never see me. But I have been brought out of my digital box today to host this masterclass, and I'm super excited about it because this really is a really exciting company that we've starting to explore and partner with. So can I get a whoop? Wonderful. So without further ado, Joe.
Hi.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Any chance for a round of applause, please? That would be...
please.
Yes. Dr. Joe, please forgive me. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself to begin with, please?
I always get Ken at our building to do this bit because I hate talking about myself, but yes, but it's got context. So my name's Joe Lisk. Historically, I was a composer. I say was because I've had to stop doing that. But for over 20 years, I was a media composer. Did a load of adverts, did stuff for BBC and radio and documentaries and stuff like that. And I came across these issues where I would you don't have time for writer's block. You know, when you're getting loads of briefs coming in and you're back in the days of advertising and you've got 6 hours to do a job, you don't really have time to kind of have writer's block. So what I did from an early point in my career is start making tricks to make sure that I didn't get caught down cul-de-sacs of no creativity. And that turned into a lot of kind of games of kind of rolling dice and figuring out kind of algorithmic methods to be able to get ideas, especially ideas out of my own work. I then went and kind of like moved into academia. So I went and did a master's at the Royal College of Music, where I studied with Joe Horowitz. And that was an amazing period of time, really helped me out with my kind of sense of aesthetics. And then later on in 2010, I got the opportunity. You know, I was looking at trying to study more about music and learn more about music and what its origins are and why it moves us and what it's all about, really, the philosophical question. And I didn't think I was going to get that out of studying an arts degree. I thought I needed to go more kind of engineering and scientific. So I got an opportunity to do a PhD in effectively artificial intelligence. It was, at the time, it was electronic engineering and computer science, but I then kind of tailored that towards artificial intelligence and explored the capabilities of AI to be able to write music, to be able to kind of aid us in our craft and help us write music. And my main question in my PhD was basically saying, given a piece of film and given a brief for a musical score for that piece of film, can an AI actually produce something credible that would sound like a professional film score composer and write that music? This was then put out as a study, as when you're doing a study like that, you actually have to kind of measure the effectiveness of your research. So my work was put out to a series of IMDb professional film composers, 50% of which thought they were listening to a fellow professional film composer. So that was kind of my academic journey, but it all starts as a practitioner, which means everything which we've done and everything we now do at the company we're all practitioners. We're all people who have been performers and musicians, composers, arrangers, orchestrators, and so on. So a lot of our approach is all based on that kind of approach towards helping practitioners rather than replacing them.
Fantastic. That's a really great line to end on there. In terms of the room, if you don't mind me just asking, Joe, after that introduction, hands up who's actively using AI now in their creativity in some shape or form. Hands up who has explored it in their study, so maybe in their assessment work or whatever. Yeah? Yeah, oh look, some cheeky smiles there when I said assessment, could see that. Well, this is really why it was so great to sort of start working with Darcy and Joe and his team, because we as an institution and as a university, we really do want to ensure we are fully exploring creative technologies and new technologies that can really benefit the practitioner, particularly their creative output. It would be wrong to not address the bit of the elephant in the room that I think we'll talk a bit about later, Joe. There is some ethical considerations and some different points of view. And what's been really wonderful about working with Darcy and understand what you're doing is the way in which you've approached the development of the technologies you're working on. So I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about that, how you've kind of worked with the sector, looked at kind of how you're developing Darcy. What is Darcy? Which would be really helpful as well.
So Darcy there's a long story behind Darcy, actually. Darcy's history goes back 10 years. I met my co-founder back in 2014, just towards the end of my PhD. And I've been doing this study, as I say, of trying to figure out a way of generating music, but also being able to credit that back to the writer who inspired the AI for the creation. So it's not just trained on all sorts of music which is out there and then it kind of writes something and you can never trace back to the origins of who the writer is. This system is actually taught. So it's taught by you as a composer, it's taught by you as an analyst, and then it can take your teachings and then kind of regurgitate them in new constructs and new places, either for computer games or for scores and so on. So I showed this to my original investor like 10 years ago. And he said, right, this is brilliant. And he didn't know anything about music, but he knew people in the music industry. And we realized within about the first week of working together that we were way too early. This was way too early. Like that, back then, the music industry hated the principle of digital. You know, Spotify was an evil to them. And, you know, they just come off the back of all the Napster issues. So they had not actually had the uptake from streaming. They'd not seen the benefit of the money that came from that new paradigm. So us coming along saying, "Hey, we're doing AI composition," it was a non-starter. You know, it just looked like we were trying to do something even worse than their worst fears. So we said, "Okay, rather than us trying to compose music with AI, why don't we take all of these rights holders' music, the stuff that's being put on social media, stuff that's being put on adverts, film trailers, and everything, and say, let's create a series of tools which will allow users to repurpose rights holders' music and trace that all the way through. So we know who wrote it, who should be credited with it, who should get money from it, and do all of the reporting and all of the tracking of that, whilst also giving the ability for users to create sensitive musical edits, like musical editing. Who here does musical editing? Any music editors? Right, so it's quite a skilled art to be able to make sure that you're doing an accurate music edit and you're preserving timing and you're telling a story when you've actually got a piece of fixed film and you're trying to shape music to it. So we created AI editing tools which could analyze the music and figure out a way to sensitively edit it and then trace that and give it all back to rights holders. So that's kind of the origins of where Darcy started. Now, fast forward through the clock, and we've obviously been in contact with the industry now. Talk about it, 8 years worth of us creating loads of patents on protecting rights holders' works. When we came along and said, right, we're actually going to do generative composition now, the industry said, oh, it's you guys, it's going to be great. So how does it work? Like, how did we benefit? Rather than, what's going on? So just having that kind of history, that 8-year history of the industry meant that when we said, right, now we're going to do generative composition, there was already a dialogue in place to say, okay, well, this is going to be good. So our whole approach with Darcy is to basically, as I say, it's to take the minds of users or take the minds of contributors and then be able to trace through the system as it writes. Where did these notes come from? Which work? Which people's ideas were it? And how do I credit them? And this means now we can actually have composers collaborating through user interfaces. And just to give an example, like you can say, all right, well, I've just written this piece and I want this type of bass and I want this type of chords and I want this type of strings. So it'd be like, okay, well, then your piece is 22.37% John Williams strings. It is 14.8% Jay-Z's beats. It is 7% the Beatles catalog for their chord scheme. And you can trace all of that back and say, right, these are the rights holders. These are people who've contributed and said they want to opt in to this system. And it is an opt-in system, not a please tell us later you want to opt out. And that means that we can then kind of credit back and say, okay, here's how the royalty pie should be split up. So that's Darcy's approach, and that's the kind of brief history of the company.
Fantastic, thank you. And just on that point you mentioned there about some of its application, but it'd be really great to know just in terms of your perspective of where you see AI influencing music. Where can you see AI right now influencing music creation, music editing, music production?
Everywhere. So obviously from an editing perspective, as we just discovered, like it's something which not a lot of people do or feel like they've got the skill set to do. So being able to put editing tools into the hands of music supervisors, like one of the big things you see with music supervisors is if you are, say you're doing an advert or a film cue and you want to get some music for it, some source music, you'll speak to a music supervisor. They'll send you 10 tracks and they'll say, right, this one, have a listen to this one at 3 minutes, 27 seconds. We think there's a bit there that'll suit it. And then this other track, listen. And you're just going through, like doing all of this work to try and figure out what on earth are you trying to tell me is suitable about this music on this piece of film. Whereas if they can actually give you, if they can take a tool themselves and go, look, I'm just going to make the edit. This bit, this bit, this bit, this bit, bang, whack it on the video. Right, that's one cue done. It gives you the ability to perceive as a producer, as a director, as someone who's trying to source music, that material much more easily, you know? So that's how, from an editing perspective, we're seeing the world changing. From a compositional perspective, let's have a look at the way the world actually has traditionally worked. Look at someone like Hans Zimmer, who's got a staff of 1,500 people, does about 60 film scores a year, and I couldn't even spot 60 films a year. Like, you just have to sit there watching them all day long, deciding what you want to write. But he's got a machine, which means that his creativity and his craft is supported by individuals, which then can actually functioning put that work together and make that happen. Now, why haven't we all got that? We're just as creative, but we just don't have the resource to be able to do it. So AI gives you that craft ability. There's so many people with amazing musical ideas that are held back simply because they say, well, you don't have the techniques, you don't have the skills to be able to record it, you don't know how to voice chords properly. Why is that in the way of your creativity? Because AI can say, well, I'll do that bit for you. You just do the ideas bit, and I'll credit you with the composition. But when you need, as you'll see later, some drums and you can give me your idea, I'll give you some knobs that you can twist in order to get that. Same for bass, same for strings, same for any sort of arranging, same for being able to substitute chords within your pieces. This is all stuff that AI can do to help us with the craft of our creativity.
Fantastic. We touched upon the ethical conundrum, if you like, or conversation. Just show of hands, everyone in the room. Your position at the moment when you hear AI, who in the room's like, yeah, excited, that's great, tell me more? Who's a little bit more reserved, kind of sort of in the middle, not sure, still thinking about it? Who's like, no, don't want to go near it? Okay, that's interesting. Because I did a talk with some students at the beginning of the year when the movement happened, i.e. OpenAI happened, and that did not look the same. It was just a sea of people going, no. That's what it was. So what do you think's which is great to see, by the way, everybody. What do you think's changed culturally or maybe in society that's maybe seen more of a general embrace of AI movement now?
Apart from anything else, it's education. You also see this in business. You see this in the investment sector as well. Like, everybody was terrified of it, but now it seems like everybody's granny uses AI. You know, you've got something like ChatGPT. It's just like, well, everybody understands it now. Oh, I see why it's useful. I see why I can benefit from it. I see how it helps me. I see how it gets me out of a parking ticket. I see how it helps me, you know, do all of these different things which I might have struggled with before. And I'm personally dyslexic. I know we were having a conversation earlier.
We were having a conversation, but I have to stop you because you just said about getting out of a parking ticket, so we need to talk about that afterwards. Just saying. But sorry, you were talking about neurodiversity.
Yeah.
I just interrupted it with a joke. That was terrible.
ADHD, no?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, absolutely. So the fact that we've all been exposed to it means, what is fear? Fear is just the unknown, right? It's the thing, there's nothing more fearful than fear itself. This whole concept of, if we don't understand, that's where, I'm going to sound like Yoda if I carry on, but yeah, fear is the thing which will get us. But the more we're exposed to things, the more that we actually look into things, the more we say, oh, I see how this can help. So I think what ChatGPT has done and what these large language models have done is helped finally the masses to get their heads around why AI can be useful to them. And therefore, it immediately kind of removes the fears that are initially there if we know nothing and understand nothing about it.
Absolutely. What about the impact of AI in music and creative arts more generally? So I'm thinking now, we are where we are. What are you thinking what could the landscape look like in, say, 5 years' time? What's the long term, or certainly the immediate long term?
So this very neatly touches on where we're going with technology in general, what our demands of technology are. We've all heard of the principle of Web 3.0, have we? This concept of Web 3.0, Web 2.0.
Hans, Web 2.0?
Web 3.0.
Should we do a quick explanation of that? I think that would be helpful, yeah.
So these aren't web standards. It's not like, oh, well, I've got to get an updated browser and operating system. No, what this is they're phases of our kind of social economic fabric of society. So back when the internet came about, we had this concept of Web 1.0. And what it was the web was like a newspaper. People had websites. They told me what they wanted to say on their websites, and that's it. I got no interaction. I didn't get to argue. They just told stuff to me. So there was a big kind of like surge when tools came around 20 years ago. You don't think these companies like Google and Facebook and so on, they weren't around when I was your age. They were, these are things which have sprung up since. And what they did is they sprung up saying, hey, people want a voice. People want their own platform. People want to be able to distribute their own music. People want to be able to talk to their friends and say what's important to their life and have a voice. So that was the evolution of, or the start of Web 2.0, this concept of, no, I now dictate. I'm the person who makes the content, not you feeding it to me. I make the content and I share it amongst my community. Now, what we're seeing in this current day and age is everybody's now thinking, yeah, but I've had enough of big companies owning my stuff. Why do they monetize it? Why do they take the lion's share? Why do they decide whether I'm successful or not in my message? I'm the person making the content, not them. So we've moved to this concept of Web 3.0 now, which is saying, no, I don't want your permission anymore. I don't want you to have to ask your permission to do things. And also, I don't want to have to be trusted by you. This is something that we have from legacy with banks and so on. Okay, we're seeing these transactions. Precisely what were you doing at Pizza Hut at this point in time? It's none of your business. I'll send money where I want to send it. So we've got these demands of technology now saying, I'm sick to death of these big companies owning my stuff. I want to own my stuff, and I don't want to have to ask your permission, and I don't want to have to be trusted to do what I want to do. So AI is a great enabler of that. AI, especially in music and in music circles. Imagine now not having to ask companies, if you're a musician, for a publishing deal. Imagine not having to ask to get a label contract. You simply can put your stuff out and sell it on blockchain, sell it and share the royalties with people who want to invest in you as an artist, but also use AI to trace your material out there in the space and figure out how you should be able to collect royalties of various platforms without having to ask permission from those platforms. So I see the next 5 years is this push to saying, look, we don't need to have permission of these massive companies anymore, which are the social media companies, which are what we call the big guys. We're taking control of this ourselves, and that's how we're going to see technology moving for us.
How does that sound? Yes. All right, we'll finish there. No, it's great. Web 3.0 is a movement. I would recommend you all take a look at that as a movement, because if it's not something you're familiar with, it has the potential of dramatically impacting technology as well. Talk to me a little bit about responsible AI research initiatives that Darcy have undertaken. You've mentioned a little bit about it before, but it'd be great just to hear a bit more about how you've approached that.
Okay, so I suppose the way to frame that is to say, well, how does normal AI research happen? Why has there been such a backlash? Why are rights holders so annoyed with the way that AI has been working? And we've spoke about large language models. We understand that LLMs, we've all heard this concept. This is ChatGPT and so on. What they basically are is they're very sophisticatedly trained. In fact, it's not less sophisticated. It's more the brute force that we have now with compute power and the amount of information that is digital. We can take a neural network, we can take an AI and train it on the whole history of the internet, spend tens of millions doing this and training it to be able to make predictive text, which makes incredibly intricate and sentences which make sense. And it's kind of a brute forcing model. So people have been trying to apply this to the music space as well. But I was actually on stage with Chris Horton, who's effectively as high as you get as far as technology is concerned in Universal Music Group in New York, and he was talking about this concept and saying the problem is in the musical context is as if you've broken into a music store, you've got all of the sheet music, you've chopped it all up into little bits of confetti, then you've kind of moved it around to figure out where all the groups are, then you've randomly picked from bits to create a new work. You've no idea who owns any of it. Who's giving you permission to do that? So, of course, the more stuff you use, the better it is. So unless you actually are giving permission for your work to be used as a training set, that is illegal. Never mind immoral, it's actually illegal. You're not allowed to do it. And we're seeing now a big push away from this concept of ethics towards, no, never mind ethics. Is it legal? Is what you're doing physically allowed? So the problems that we have with whenever we talk about AI companies is they tend to be very keen to get the solution, and well, their rights issues, we'll work that out later, We're very much the opposite. What we say is, right, we're not doing that. What we're going to do is we're going to give a suite of tools and a suite of things to people for them to be able to, rather than to be trained on their information, to be taught by them. So you express your ideas and your concepts, and then I can trace through to you note by note what your contribution is to a broader palette. And just from what I was saying earlier with the Web 3.0, imagine now when you're, say, writing a piece of music or doing a piece of art, but I'll stick to music because that's the context. If you're writing a piece of music, you no longer have to write a whole composition. You can write the principles of a component of a composition. Like, here's how I do my brass stabs, or here's how I do my guitar voicing, or here's how I go about making my bass riffs, or my string stabs, or whatever it is. And then you can say, right, these string stabs, I'm going to teach the AI how to write in my style. Now, whenever anybody's looking for string stabs out there, my work might pop up, in which case I now get credited for those notes which are written on the edge at that point in time, but I've not written any of it yet. Now, I can now sell the publishing of that in a Web 3.0 world, saying, my stuff's never written a bloody note. But guess what? Next year, when my thing's been used 400 times and it's generated $320, I can put up the publishing of that and say, well, I made $320 off this concept of writing string stabs last year. Who wants to start the bidding at £1,000? You can have 50% of my publishing. And this is a way that we get empowered now to be able to use new technology to say, right, AI is representing me and I get credited with it. That's Darcy's mission, to try and give us that power and that capability.
Wonderful. There will be time for questions at the end, by the way. Just to make sure everyone's sort of on the same page here, could you explain a little bit more about large language models and how they work? Because I think that would be quite helpful. We've got about an hour.
Lock the doors. If we go back to, there's a salient paper which was written by Shannon and Weaver it was the birth of communication studies back in the 40s, 50s. And this paper looked at the principle of communication in general, and it studied entropy and redundancy. Now, those two concepts are, if something is redundant, it means you're fully expecting it. So if I say the darling buds of, we're all expecting the word may, okay? It's a kind of redundant word. Whenever we meet in a corridor, like we do this thing called facet communication, which is me going, hi, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm great, how are you? Oh, I'm great, how are you? We're just opening a line of communication. It's all thoroughly, totally redundant, yeah? But then what we do is we try then communicating entropic ideas, which are surprises, which are turning points. So what we can do is we can actually now, the principle of a large language model, it kind of takes this concept and it says, okay, let's look through all of the orders of all of the words in all of the world and try and predict what the next most likely word is going to be. And 50 words on, they don't know what they've done or where they've come from. So there's this kind of string of letters that come out. They're called Markov chains. So a large language model is effectively a sophisticated way of modern AI being trained on massive amounts of data to be able to do this in a very reliable way. And what then happens is there's a series of heuristics or rules which allow you to then restrict where it gets its information from. So I can say, express this concept. Now I'd like you to express it using the words from the King James Bible. It would say, okay, well, what are the symbolic elements which I've got within that text and those words and those orders that'll express this abstract concept? I hope that made sense.
That's really helpful, very helpful, because I've heard many definitions and that was really, really welcome. I'm conscious that I'm sure everyone in the room would like to see a demo of Darcy and their products and what they do. So I think that's quite a nice segue actually into the demos.
Hi, my name's Ed. My background, I'm a drummer by trade really, but songwriter, producer, engineer, whatever, etc. So these are basically composer tools. They are designed to help as like an AI co-pilot for you. So you're writing music. These can sort of fill the gaps in your expertise, your skill level, stuff like that. And you can sort of collaborate with yourself because you're no longer sort of not able to do things. You can sort of put in your ideas, it helps you, and then you can workshop those. I'm going to load in an arrangement. Which one do we want? This one. So this is something we've made already. This is basically all these notes at the bottom are you can't really click anything. It's all above here is basically rules and methods to generate notes. So let's have a play. This is sort of like a dancey kind of track. So here we go. This is looking just at the drums. You'll see here we can sort of start playing around with it. This is like a 4 on the floor dancey thing. You can start using these ideas to... we use these principles of sort of finding the most salient part of the idea, and then from that you can sort of generate additional parts from it. So for instance, we can start with this rhythm here on the kick drum, and say from there we want you now to embellish on it. And add notes. And as you move these sliders up, they sort of become further away from the original idea. So you've now got a 4-bar loop straight away that's sort of progresses as it goes along. Same with hats as well. You can sort of add these little like patterns. And add a little fill at the end. So that's the drums. I mean, again, I said we'll look at those properly later on. So this is the full arrangement. I'll give you a little play of it, then we can start sort of tinkering with it and show you how some of the tools work. So the first thing we do, we can look at all these rhythms you've got here. That pattern, this is sort of the same idea you saw on the drums of having like a sort of a skeleton idea of which we can then sort of hang other ideas off. We're using this here. So this is basically this we call it clave. So I don't know if anyone's heard of like claves before. There's the bits of wood you hit. Yeah, and then there's also as the rhythm as well. So you hear it a lot in Latin music where I think the one you just clapped. Yeah, so they're called the son 3/2. Then you can flip it around. It's 2/3 son, which is, and there's a few others as well. So we basically took that idea and thought, well, that's how they in Cuban music they think of music. What if you could take that concept and apply it to sort of all like Western syncopated music? So we did a bit of maths, and I mean, in Cuban there's about 6, I think they use all the time. We worked out there's 90 if you use just in 1 bar 4/4, and then from that we start expressing all our rhythms based on that idea. So let's have a look. So these little patterns here that the clave driven, they're basically it's not a rhythm that's static, because the whole problem with that is if you change one part of it, then all the rhythms don't make any sense. You can express rhythms based on this top line. Then all you have to do is change the top line and your arrangement is completely preserved. So the idea is stuff like if you have a melody, you can have this arrangement based on that. You can change the melody. The arrangement will sound exactly as good, but it completely repopulates. So I'll show you how it works. So I'll put a few of these to clave driven. So here we've got, this is basically the rhythms happening here. You can then start changing all the parts, and then all the rhythms will start repopulating. And it gives a completely different rhythmic feel. So that's quite sort of on the beat. And you can start making it sort of more and more syncopated. So you can see as I'm changing that, all the parts are sort of adapting in real time, but the arrangement's still as It makes as much sense as before. And this kind of concept is, does anyone know Max Martin, the songwriter, very successful, well, most successful ever, I think. This is how he writes all his songs. He uses these club edits and makes these amazing, like, that's why all the rhythm, it's all rhythm. The chord progression is pretty simple for his music. It's all this like rhythmic ideas and interest. He makes these arrangements. And we were listening to a load of music and all these number ones and stuff. We're like, hey, this is how he's doing it. It's like, you use this like idea of a top line and you get this like perfect rhythm that comes off the top of it. So we're gonna loop this. So at the moment, it's just, this is what was put in. It's E minor, but it's quite sort of uplifting. We can go into this section here and start regenerating. So let's go with, to start off, this is sort of like a minory. So you can see your arrangement here. This is, it's just gone and picked some chords in the same, oh no, it hasn't generated, it's what we were on before. We can then go and say, right, verse, I'm gonna go, let's just do lots of chords because we like chords. This is like, this is gonna be built out into like a full-on, we use chord trees and stuff like that, which we don't need to go into because it's about 4 hours of explanation. You've got, this is basically, this movement size, like perceived motion from the original. It's like how much of a journey do you want to go during your chord progression? So you can see I'm just adjusting it and this chorus is then just regenerating as I'm doing that. The same with the verses as well. And you've got sections here, like, so for instance, the bridge, which you can see down here. That is basically composed, that's looking ahead to the chorus because the bridge is getting from the verse chords to the chorus chords. So if you change the chorus, for instance here, you'll see the bridge recomposed as well because it now needs to get from one place to another place. Home and away is, do you want to start on the tonic, so chord 1, or do you want to start somewhere else? So then now. So there you go. So that's like sort of a minory thing. We did a lot of work with some songwriters on this, and it's there like this is such a good tool for songwriting. You can just regenerate your chords and rebrief it and be like, oh, I like that, don't like that, keep changing it. So add a bit of contrast. I can then make it go, pick something like aggressively happy. Country pop, how about that? And quickly just put something in and let's go. This is really, really happy. That's the kind of thing, like if you want to change the chord progression of a piece of music after that you've written, like this, I mean, this is about a couple of minutes of music here. If you've got to change the chord progression, it's like every single note needs to change. That's a ridiculous amount of work. And so you're like, oh, I'm just going to keep it. I've stayed on this chord progression. That's what's going to be the final piece because that's just, no one wants to spend like 4 hours redoing the whole piece, reharmonizing it. So this is basically, it's contextualizing the drum part because so this is how the whole system is going to look roughly. It's this thing of all these different modules interacting in a place where they're all listening to each other, talking to each other, and then creating this music that you can just quickly change, adjust bits here, and everything's adapting, recomposing. It's sort of augmenting what you can do already. We can then look at the drums. So it's taking this module out, we're packaging up, making it look good, making it work good, and then we're going to basically take it out with all the other parts as well. So like the rhythms, chords, melody generators, this sort of the pattern bit, everything like that. And then it'll be recombined. So you've got all these parts working together. So I'll load up a different environment now. We can take a look at the drums. So this is in Logic. At the moment, it just sits in Logic, Ableton, whatever you want, as a VST. Here I'm going to be basically triggering my own sounds. So we spoke to a lot of producers and people really like, crafting sounds, using their own sounds, something they're really proud of. So this is something that can just trigger whatever you've got already. You don't have to sort of use our sounds. But we are also releasing it as well in the final release in a couple of weeks. it'll come with our own samples. We sample a lot of like 909s, 808s, acoustic drum kits. So it's sort of however you want to use it. But I mean, that's kind of how one of the key principles was. We don't want to get in the way of what you're doing already. We want to sort of adapt. It shouldn't feel like you're having to adapt to us, because a lot of other AI compositional tools, it's like, right, you can just, there's this button you press and it's like, give me some music, and you get some music and it's like, well, now what? This is so, it should be, you can use it as much or as little as you want. This idea of skeletons as well, it's basically skeleton rhythms and then embellishments. So the way this adapts to your music at the moment is we have these clickable boxes here are basically, it sort of take whatever you're working with at the moment and then create a skeleton that sort of is roughly the shape of what you've got. So I'll start with a pattern that's like this. I'll make it simpler. So that's like a starting point. Make it a bit faster as well. How about this? So the idea behind this is basically, how would a drummer think? It's sort of like speaking to a drummer in a session or something. You basically say, right, I want you to do something that kind of goes boom, bap, like that. Then how would you sort of embellish on that? So we're basically going to take these, make a 4-bar loop. And there's these ideas of, here you can see the busy and complex. Busy is basically like, do you want to add some more notes? And this complex is, do you want them to be sort of nearer or further from your original idea? So you can very quickly, just using the same skeleton input, you just go and put in, I want it to be first bar, not very much added. Second bar, a little bit more. Can you see that happening down here? Yeah. Yeah, so that's, you can see this, what you put in is always going to be there. And this is just going to add stuff based on that. And the same thing as well, you want to change this, your input. That then changes what gets added because it's all related to what you have put in. So then straight away, you've got like a 4-bar loop straight away, which is, I mean, how many people here do drum programming much? Yeah, it's, I mean, maybe because I'm a drummer, I find it kind of tedious. To do a lot of it is like a lot of clicking and sort of adding those bits of rhythmic complexity that I think add a lot to like the music. It just takes a lot of time. Whereas this is like, right, just give me something that's varying every time. You can recalculate it and it's like a new loop every time. So this is sort of like a traditional drum sound. We want to then also look at, we can also do like we wanted this to be as genre agnostic as it could be. So we can look at some sort of electronic sounds. So you got sort of like a trappy kind of beat like that. So same principles work. You add like fills or something as well. Right, so this is because like this kind of beat, people like it. It's really popular at the moment. So we made this little thing here, the Trappifier it's called. So this is like to do the hats, right? And this is the kind of thing that to program in a pattern like this, and this can be just regenerated every time. That's the thing that takes absolutely ages to do. It's ridiculous. You can just do it like straight away, and it's going to be varying every beat, so it's going to be like really interesting to listen to. You can change like the core patterns. So yeah, that thing, I mean, that's really cool. You know, it's like to program it, it's ridiculous, and you can basically create like an infinitely varying trap hat, like a whole song where it doesn't repeat once. It's just like completely regenerates every time. So we can lastly, I reckon, look at how this kind of work in a song, maybe. Be cool. So this is, because this idea of skeletons, it's kind of, it's kind of hard to explain sometimes. So this is basically a piece of music just being composed without drums, like a little funky beat. Turn this off. So this is what we're going to use as like our original primary idea. So the first thing I'm going to do is basically pick like a skeleton that matches this. So it's following the bass. And from there, you can just start moving all these things to regenerate. You can add a fill as well. And this thing as well here is where you can get it to basically regenerate every loop. So it's how like a real drummer wouldn't just play the same thing every 4 bars. They'd regenerate. So if you look here, it'll recalculate every time it loops around. You can sort of like jam with it as well, like kind of how you would have like a drummer just jamming onto your music. You can obviously like export as well, drag and drop, easy things like that. So however you want to use it. There you go. You can sort of, if you want to like manually edit it as well, whatever you want. So as Joe's mentioned, we've just started our open beta, and we'd like you to sort of join it and basically give your input, because this is for people to use. We want to invite you to sort of feedback as much as possible, and we will like listen to your feedback. We've already changed it. People contact us all the time, say, "Oh, I wish I could do this." We want to be able to then just put that in and like make it for you, basically. So I'll put up the QR codes now.
We are, as of tonight, as of this moment, launching our open beta community. So this isn't linked to a specific technology. It's talking to a group of people that we're really hoping would like to get involved in giving us feedback, using our tools, and telling us what can be better, what's useful, what's not, etc. So what I can say, there's 2 things I can say. First of all, for everyone in this room specifically tonight, I've got a QR code which gives you free access to join the community. And then with regards to the video going out, there's going to be a QR code for a 50% discount to join that community.
That was focused on drums, but the technology is there to explore so many other areas, so maybe that would be helpful to share.
The next thing which makes sense straight after drums is bass. So our next VST instrument will be bass, and then the bass will lock in with the drums. So as you're programming these claves, as you're programming this kind of system, the drums will be able to embellish, but the bass will then be locked in with it. And you can choose different bass styles. You can throw different chord schemes at it. From there, the natural next thing that we're looking at is keys. That'll also give you the ability to make kind of abstract loops, more kind of trip-hoppy, kind of sample-based effects. And that'll, of course, be sensitive to chords. And it'll also follow, yet again, this whole internal system of how all of the VSTs... It's misleading to say that they're speaking to each other. There is only one. There's kind of one mind, and then the actual interface is just giving their different output depending on what plugin they are. So a lot of this is going to be appearing as a series of VST instruments. We've got plans for an orchestral one, like to be able to do string arranging for you and be able to do all that kind of stuff. And then the concept is once we've released all this, we're currently sat within a DAW using all these VST instruments. But once you've got that level of automation within your craft process, there's no reason why that we need that DAW at all. We could then move on to actually that being a mobile app. We can move it to being a standalone app, whereby once you're interfacing with these tools and they're being part of your whole creative process, we can give a more automated system. And that's where we can now start dropping down to individuals which just simply, they want to express their ideas, but they don't know how to use a DAW. So that's kind of where the future will be. And it is a different audience. We will learn different things about that community than we will from this type of community, this kind of pro-user community. But this is a very important stepping stone for us to think, look, are we on the right lines? Like, is this stuff useful? And how do people interact with it?
Brilliant. So everyone's going to join the community, yeah, and have a download.
I'm so grateful, thank you.
No, it's amazing. And what an amazing opportunity to get hold of tech early and be part of that beta community. That is really exciting thing to offer our students. So thank you. I think it would be good to take some questions now. If you straight in, okay.
Hello. Thank you, by the way, for coming and for the code and everything. It's super exciting. You mentioned that the next instrument would be bass and then in the future guitar. When you are programming bass, for example, what bass sound is it using? And is there a potential for you to play bass to the AI and for it to emulate your sound and come up with different patterns?
Yes. So one of the things that you'll see coming along, just to go back to the drums plugin, because that's the one that you'll see first, is there's a feature which will be rolling in basically the third iteration in a few months' time. There'll be another iteration before that, but in that third iteration, this is going to be able to listen to your track and say, well, your track without drums, let me identify where the clavier is. Let me identify where the skeletons are. Right, now, this is what I think are the settings to give you the best performance for your drums to go with your track. Another thing it's going to be able to do is going to be able to actually listen to any track you give it from your work and say, well, this is my work, this is my drums, this is what I programmed in the past. Could you please learn from the type of patterns which I use and give me my settings that I would do when I'm normally doing my drum programming? So there's two ways of automating it to answer the question. The first one is, I haven't got any drums, how do I get some? Here's my track, which is useful. But even more importantly, this is how I write my drums. How do I now do more of my drums without me having to do it? I want my mind in the machine. So the bass will be exactly the same approach. There will be, I don't have a bass on this, please can you give me a bass? Great, that works. But then also, right, here is how I do my bass lines. Can you please now abstract from that, from the way I write my pitches, the pitch choices I make, the thickness of my texture, how fast I play my notes, how I play with and without either the clavier that's going on in the background or the way I lock into the drums. Learn all of those settings, and now please put those settings as my preset of the way I write my bass lines into the machine so I can automate my actual output faster.
Am I right in saying both as well that the patterns, let's call them that for a moment, they can be exported as MIDI, can't they? So you can just have your bog standard, blocks of MIDI in your DAW. So obviously that's a useful thing.
Yeah, you just drag it from where it says export and drop it into the actual.
Yeah, brilliant. Question.
Hi, so I'm a master's student down in Brighton, and I'm actually focusing on AI and composition for my master's, and I'm hoping to, fingers crossed, go into a PhD in that area afterwards. So I was going to ask, what kind of skills does someone wanting to do a PhD in AI music composition, what might they need? What might be some kind of, because listening to you speak, there's a lot of areas already covered, so I need something new, So what would your advice be in that kind of setting?
Well, you can't really escape from having to be able to code at some point.
Okay.
What is important, do you come from an engineering background, or is it more of a music background?
Musical background,
okay,
compositional background.
Because that's me too. In fact, who here is from an engineering background? You're from an engineering background. And who else is who is from more a musical background? Is that right? That's me included. So we as engineers will have you have you think that this is all incredibly complicated stuff. That's not necessarily the case. If you are a creative person and you come from that kind of creative background, you'll be able to make the perceptual breakthroughs which engineers won't necessarily be able to make, simply because of the way that we think creatively. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to do down engineers. I'm sure you're wonderfully creative as well. But this is why it's useful to start kind of gaining those engineering skills early. But there are some interesting programs. Like, for example, Queen Mary University is currently doing a PhD in artificial intelligence and music. Now, what you do on that as part of the doctoral training centre is they realise that not everybody is an AI expert. They're more interested in musical experts to contribute to the AI conversation. So rather than a 3-year PhD, it would be a 4-year PhD. And that first year is kind of an engineering master's. Learn coding, learn electronic engineering, learn how to make ducks walk across the room and follow each other, like all of that type of stuff, just to kind of get the basics. Then start asking your question. So that's a good place to give you that foundation. But if you want to get yourself ahead of the curve with that, learning Python is really useful in this day and age. Yeah. I must say I never bothered. I was more of a Java guy when I was actually doing my PhD, and I kind of always... I never really got in. I never really did. But I wish I'd have just learnt Python. It would have made my life much, much easier. Yeah. And that's, of course, the way that you actually use Python scripts to initiate a lot of the way that AIs are set up now and architectures are set up. So that's a really good starting point.
Great. Also, can I read your PhD?
Certainly, absolutely. I can send it as a PDF. In fact, we should put it on the website, actually. It's quite flattering to see people reading the PhD. We actually have 20 copies in the office that are regularly used by staff just to reference the architecture of how this stuff works. So feel free to have a look.
Is it online? Could we?
Yeah, it is. But let's make it a lot easier. We'll
put it in the library, BIMM library, exclusive.
Sure.
I'm not joking. The digital one, unless you want a load of physical books.
No, we give the digital one. It's obviously published by Queen Mary. Also, it's patented as well, so it's published in the patent office. Okay. But that's fine. So if you publish a patent, what it means is it is open to the whole world. The whole principle of a patent is I'll show you how to do it as long as you give me 20 years protection on it within a certain government. So it's completely open, and we'll make sure it's online for us. And also it's available at Queen Mary University, but you guys have it as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Is your program or the programs you're planning to make also available to every possible DAW? Is it?
Yes. Pro Tools is always a difficult one. Making plugins that work with Pro Tools is quite complicated.
Just chop that as a quote.
Yeah. But yes, at the moment this already works. Obviously in Ableton, it works in GarageBand, it works in Logic, it works in Cubase, etc. So
Fruity Loops?
Fruity Loops, yeah, absolutely.
There you go. I thought that might be the case with your question. I've got you. Don't worry.
And we will make sure that we have a Windows version coming ASAP for you guys as well.
For people who know me here know that I have some brain issues, so AI could be a game changer for me. So I'm doing a version of me for my final year project that's me, all written by me, all the graphics are by me, and then I'm doing an AIT version. Where everything is AI, like the character to everything to the music. Now I've been testing out the AI apps, not absolute shit, because I've interviewed quite a lot of AI engineers and stuff, and they've said that, like you said, it's not made by composers, it's made by people who are good at coding. So one of my things is, can I interview you for my MA?
Certainly.
Amazing. Do you have... I'm very direct. Do you have...
I love it.
Right, get my hustle on while I'm here. And do you have YouTube videos or a manual that teaches me how to use this stuff? And how long is this stuff available to me to use for free?
Whatever help you need, that's what Darcy's here for. That's the relationship with BIMM. So we'll just make that happen.
Thanks.
I don't know how that is, so we'll make sure you've got permission to all the stuff.
Thanks.
There is learning tools, there is explanation videos. That's all forthcoming at the moment.
Right.
Where's my Anne-Marie? Just the lady in charge of that, and Sophie, who's doing it all. So that's all coming online shortly, and we'll make sure. In fact, it'd be really good to get your feedback on whether they're useful and whether they help you.
Yeah.
With access to the tools in a way which is effective.
Okay.
So we'd love to get that feedback, and
Pleasure.
We'll make sure that you've got all the details.
If you could spell out some ABCs for me. So if I wanted to just begin an adventure in terms of actually building a plugin, doesn't matter how complex, but a basic one, how would you go about learning that? From
building a VST plugin itself. Oh God, it's been 15 years since I did that. there's programming paradigms. If you give me your details, I can put you in touch with some of our engineers, which can talk you through that. I'll also send you through all of my old notes on it as well. What languages do you code in?
I think you probably overestimated me in terms of learning the very basics.
Okay, so what you'd need to do is, the likes of C++ and so on becomes involved with this because you're doing digital signal processing. So really the first thing you need is a tool chain. You need the setup to say, here is the ability for me to program a language. Here's the ability for me to make a window which appears within a folder I can then load as a VST. There's modules you can do on this in universities which will help you build a VST plugin, and you can go through those phases. But you're going to need to be able to do some coding in order to get something useful out of a DSP signal.
Maybe we could look at providing some resources around that. Obviously, we're not a computer science institution, but I have had a lot of interest from students to explore that in a bit more detail. So maybe it's something we can look at.
Yeah, and I've definitely got some lecturer notes when I used to do this about what I was teaching as well. So I can dig all of that out, and I'll show, maybe even if we need to make a course for rudimentary VST design, then that's something we could help with.
There's so much magic happening tonight. I love it, because that would be absolutely incredible. Would you like that, students? Oh, I love it. I've not done this for a while, but the fact that you've whooped at building a plugin is why I love working here. Fantastic. No, we should definitely do that. It's amazing. Another question, I think? Yes.
I think you touched very briefly on the sampling side. I was wondering about the sampling capabilities of maybe your software.
In what context?
So like AI sample manipulation, or maybe recording and then just using AI to completely change a recording, maybe?
So you guys will all be familiar with the complications that have been around the likes of these Drake sound-alikes. And you've heard all these sound-alikes, and UMG's just now done this deal with YouTube where they're licensing voices and they're licensing their signed artists to enable that to be legal. That type of technology, just agnostic away from doing voices, is capable of doing a lot of other sophisticated things. I can sing a cello part now going, and if this is trained on cello playing, it will then be able to give me a realistic cello performance of that. So we're going to see sampling move into a whole new paradigm now with effectively, God, if I use the phrase deep fake, it's not in a negative context. It's that type of technology being applied to enable us to now say, well, I've just sung an idea, that's my cello line. I don't need an engineer to go away and now trying to program this, or I don't need to get a cellist into a place to try performing. I just want to have it happen as a sample for me right now so I can be expressive. And I can sing things which are impossible for a cello to play, or, off the range of instruments and stuff like that, and still have an AI go, well, this is how a flute could do that if it could play that range, which it can't.
It feels like a natural progression from audio to MIDI. So, that kind of sampling. I mean, I can just see that just...
Well, I remember the first time it was just MIDI to audio.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Back in the old days. So.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. It's a great question, actually. Really great question. Any more? Yeah, great.
So as a small artist, what would you recommend you start doing from now in the terms of how AI is progressing and how it can be used to be profitable and just kind of help your career in general?
So we're still at early stages of being able to do that for you as a musician, as a rights holder. And that's obviously what Darcy's mission is, and that's what we're going to be rolling out. But I must say, we're kind of leading the way on that. That's not the way the rest of the AI community have been thinking. They've been thinking, how do I have a black box solution where I click a button and I spit out a tune for someone who wants to do a TikTok video? That's not very useful for us as rights holders. So what I would say is keep an eye on everything which is going on. Definitely be involved in anything going on with BIMM. One of the beautiful things about the way that BIMM is set up is these relationships that are being created with industry, companies such as us, but also other initiatives which are going on, means you're going to be exposed to cutting edge, bleeding edge stuff that the world has not seen yet. And you can be part of that conversation of how does it become useful for you? And I know that's not just us. I know there's other initiatives out there. That is so rare. It's so rare to be able to be supported by an institution which is trying to get you to critically think, but also do critical thinking with industry relevance. So by the time you actually come out of a place, you go, well, not only do I know critical thinking, but I know it on the stuff which is now being commercially taken up by the planet. So please be involved and just keep your ear to the ground on anything which is going on like this that BIMM can offer specifically. It's a very unique way that this works around here. So enjoy.
Thank you.
You sounded really enthusiastic when you mentioned about the Web3 combo and everything that's going on. I was wondering if you had any plans on integrating into that into the future, and how are you planning to develop that?
So that is actually everything I spoke about there is at the core of the way we've designed our systems. So we're just engaged on doing over here is we actually did our PhD together at Queen Mary University, also a master's in composition and also a PhD in AI and music. So one of the things that we're trying to do is one of the things that Dune is heading up, especially with the relationship with BIMM, is us being able to figure out that answer, figure out how do we use the practices. First of all, let's look at it abstractly. Don't talk about us. What is acceptable to the industry? If we're saying, how do we do this? What do rights holders demand? Like, there are simple demands like, well, I want to be able to opt into it. I don't want to have my stuff used and then we have to trace it down. If I am being used, I want to be fairly compensated for it if there's money on the table. If there's not money on the table, I want to be able to state how my material is used. I also, at any one point in the future, want to be able to opt out of this and remove my material. So these are kind of like, these are bullet points that we have to say to rights holders, what is it you expect? Now we have to ask labels that, we have to ask publishers, we have to ask composers, we have to ask arrangers, producers. And then off the back of that, what we have to do is say, right, how can we create a framework of technology which delivers and ticks all of those boxes? And when it does tick all of those boxes, how can we create a cookie cutter which will now divide revenue, which the industry recognises? So I just used the phrase producer. Well, producers are typically paid by PPL along with the musicians who are involved. So who is it who I've trained my cello on? They need some money for that cello performance I just sung. Who is it who's made the production environment? Who is the producer who kind of put that cello into a room and put a bit of a ducking around the bass drum? That person needs credit as producer and they need part of those royalties. Now we have that cookie cutter in the industry, 10% for PPL, a certain amount of dividing for composers, arrangers, and then what about publishing and all the rest of it? This is kind of stuff which is there, but we need to explore that mechanism now and say, how can we, as a company, make sure we're building technologies which ticks the boxes that we don't know what they are yet, and then divides the money out in a way that we've never done before. So to answer your question, these are the questions that we're going to be trying to investigate with the help of BIMM and with the help of the industry. And that's the grants that Dune's working on at the moment. So please be part of the conversation and help us work it out.
This has so much potential to revolutionise the industry we all love and want to be part of. So I'm just really delighted that we've been able to set up this partnership and involve students in that conversation more. So keep abreast of what's going on, because there's lots more to come.
Yeah, I mean, and also from a ethics perspective, from a critical thinking perspective, we need criticism now. We need people thinking about these questions as we move forwards, and it's a great subject area to get your teeth into. I'm not sure if you have dissertations to do, or if you have critical thinking and ethics lectures and stuff like that. For goodness sake, let's get on with it. Let's ask the questions and let's get criticised. Let's figure it out.
Hi, I'm Julia. I just wanted to ask a bit about the mixing, because at first I thought it just reminded me a bit of Apple or Ableton loops. Then I thought, okay, it actually arranges it for you, but it also sounds, I would argue, pretty mixed. And how does that work? Is it already for example, with some reverb settings, EQs and stuff? Because it just sounded like it was all put together and leveled out. So yeah, I just wanted to know how the plugin
Absolutely
works.
Brilliant. Right. So you're actually touching on one of the other components of the creative input here. It's not just about the musicology of what notes can I play where, what can my chords be, what's my structure going to be. It's the next really important link in the chain is, how do I perform that? Otherwise, it's just a MIDI string of rubbish, and it'll sound like a MIDI file. It's going to sound like a ringtone on a phone, which I must not forget, by the way. What we're basically saying here is, how do we bring a production environment to this, which means that stuff sounds good. Now, we've been doing some work with Damon Mancello. I'm not sure if you know Dr. Damon Mancello, who's a bass player for Motion Color Scene, and he's a great academic, and he's been doing a lot of production work with us. And this is part of the stuff we have to explore with how we're going to then divide monies up from people who create those production environments, because they are effectively the producer. and they're a virtual producer. So think of creating a production environment where I want to do drums and a bass. Well, first of all, I'm going to put all sorts of compression on my drums, and I'm going to figure out how to make them sit with each other and reverb. But then my bass guitar, I might want to duck that around my kick drum, and I want to set that up so whenever I fire notes in the bass drum, it triggers and feels like it's sitting in the mix with my drums. Now, I can set that up as a production environment, and then we've got a tool that we've developed called SynthMod, which means I can wrap that production environment in the cloud and now throw MIDI at that, and it is then performed with the qualities of that production. And I can credit that producer with having made that production environment, so they get access to that PPL slice of the money. So it is a really important next link of the chain. It's not just how do we do the composition, it's how do we make it sound good, how do we make it sound effective, and then credit people for that work. So what you're hearing there is a production environment which has been put together by a producer, independent of the person who then throws notes at it, or the AI that throws notes at it.
So was it like a part of the arrangement, or is it like the software actually did like some part of it, or like also what sort of control does a user have over the mix?
We've not discussed exposing controls for the mix, but it's something that we can. What actually happens here is each of the components within SynthMod are isolated. So let's say, for example, the relationship I just said of the drums and the bass. That might be one SynthMod patch, which means if I want my drums, I do this, and if I want a bass, it interacts like that. Someone else could do a completely separate environment, which is them doing their string arranging. And someone could do a completely other separate environment, which is them doing, say, their keyboards. I can then open up these three synth mods and make them all play at the same time to perform those production environments made by three different producers, and then mix them together. So I can now have an interaction not only between compositional principles, but between producers which all want to do their own bit that they're good at.
And if I could just add there, what I found really exciting about the VSTs when I saw them is that, you know, often the musicology, so the theory, the side, when we look at how AI could assist us in that space, for me, that's a really exciting development in technology, because as producers, writers, we all want to use our own samples, mix it, do the arranging. So what I really like the idea is that you've kind of got this musicology, this kind of theory underpinning of your work, and it could take you to new creative spaces. But the production of the sound, the mixing, is still within your gift to do as you would in any other VST at the moment. But there's some exciting developments, as you've heard today, where I think that's going to become more powerful and be introduced into the platforms.
It's exactly right. So SynthMod, all it is a VST wrapper. So rather than you opening up a VST in your channel strip, you open up SynthMod, and in SynthMod you open up your VST and then put your reverb on and do your panning and everything else. So when you save that, we get to save a binary blob of the setup of your VST. So then in the cloud, I can load up the same VST instrument, set the panning, set the dimensions, set all of the buses and everything else, send it to all the various reverbs and compressors, and I've recreated what you would normally do in your channel strip within your DAW. But I don't need your DAW anymore. I'm doing it online. I'm doing it, in the cloud and being able to throw notes at it.
Hi. I'd like to hear your opinion on an idea I had a few months ago. What do you think about sort of an virtual instrument physically based on physical models, which is controlled by an prompt input with an AI?
Are you talking about procedural audio? Are you talking about the interface for the instrument? What's the angle? Are you talking about when you say prompt based? I just want to understand the question.
Sort of an interface between the basic VST or control system and the user.
Right. Okay. So effectively what you're saying is if I actually type in text, how do I then automate parameters on the VST instrument with that text prompt? Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think you're going to find that a very interesting experiment, because one thing we know about music is that everybody is a subculture of one. So we all have our different language for saying different things. I've never been to a brief in my life, especially for advertising, when they said, yeah, we want upbeat, happy and lively. Every piece I've ever written is upbeat, happy and lively. But if you ask someone, well, what is upbeat to you? They'll say, well, I just love the way that chords flow through a Mozart requiem. Or someone else will say, upbeat, I just love the way that you get pounding tunes on MTV and you're just there in the office. The word just means different things to different people. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to establish or learn a language, which is, you're going to have to teach people a communal language which says, this is what you say to my instrument for it to work. or you're going to have to work out a way of using AI to say, from an embeddings perspective, what is your perspective on the meaning of these words and what you expect to see from the controls. Now, you can train that using an AI. You can say, well, give me a setting. You do a physical setting. Now describe it in text to me. And then you can train an embedding to say, make an embedding of the text, make an embedding of the actual controls, and then we'll start making a map between the two. That might be a really interesting approach, but it'll be an interesting one.
Brilliant. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you ever so much.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Just for the benefit of the students, this relationship has just started. It's part of our AI Labs initiative, which you may be familiar with. It's a research area that we're focusing on with AI, and it's very exciting that the Darcy team are offering internships to our students. There's going to be, I believe, three.
Three different roles.
Right.
For now, but definitely scaling so that the opportunities constantly come up.
Okay, so that's incredibly exciting, right, to be part of that. So do keep your eye out for that. I believe we will send a mail out of some sort.
Yeah, BIMM London will be sending it out from Creative Futures in the next week.
Brilliant. Keep your eye out for that. Yes. It will be everywhere, so everyone will have the opportunity. And also, if I can take the opportunity to do a promo for the Introduction to Artificial Intelligence short course that we have developed. There was a lot of concepts covered today, and if you want to go a bit deeper, I would recommend you do that course as a foundation. There will be more coming. But for all students, I really would recommend you go to bimmstudents.com, click on the short courses tab, and you'll find a link to enroll on that AI short course. And it hopefully will provide you that foundational knowledge of some of the concepts that we've discussed today. But Joe, Ed, and the Darcy team, thank you ever so much for joining us today. Really, really exciting. And thank you, students, for attending.